you know, when it comes to the annals of history, I think people are going to look back and go, you know who was the man? And the answer, resonating across the universe, will be Michael. And when they go, who the fuck is Michael? People that are in the know like us are going to be like, Michael Mann, bitch! And then we're going to celebrate. And then people are going to kill us for being complete idiots.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Michael Mann, the infamous, no, not infamous, famous, world famous director. He's pretty much one of those guys that is so well regarded that he's almost untouchable. But he's most renowned for making crime dramas. Super complex, super rich in dialogue crime dramas like Heat, Collateral, yeah, Collateral, etc. And he's of course made stuff like Last of the Mohicans, which is incredibly dense adaptation. It almost takes a lot of work to get into Mann's flow, to really understand and chew on the fat that he puts out there. The point is, the man's a legend.
Mann's Flow, that should be his production company.
Mann's Flow, and it's just porn company that he does. But those would be great pornos if he ever did, by the way.
That's true.
The point is, as renowned as he is, there is one film in his repertoire that is virtually unknown. Although it does have somewhat of a cult following, and that cult following is relatively small. And that has a lot to do with the fact that, one, many people claim or have assumed that he's disowned this film. Two, the film is not like any other film he's ever made. In fact, it is a horror film. And three, the film is pretty much impossible to get in its full and intended cut. And in fact, only recently have the DVD rights been acquired, but they're still not available.
Yeah, you can only get it on streaming services.
You can only get it on streaming services.
Or I guess Netflix in the UK.
And which would be a streaming service. But anyway, the point is, even that version is cut up. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about a movie called The Keep. First, hit that little tune and we'll get into it.
Movies, music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Everything goes in the house and I'm gonna copy.
So, The Keep is, to say the least, a unintentionally complex film, though I'd venture to say that if he got the full cut, it would still be as complex as a lot of Michael Mann's other movies, you know. So I'm only interested all the more to see the full cut. Do I think we'll ever get it? It seems probably not. But this is a case of whatever we still got is still pretty fucking fascinating. It's almost like, it reminds me of Don Coscarelli directing Phantasm, the first Phantasm movie. He directed a 3-hour movie, and they made him cut it down to a 90-minute movie. This is what happened with Mann and The Keep. Only Mann is a far more achieved director and scriptwriter. The results are incredibly unique, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Usually we get some pretty amazing horror when a non-horror director, or a director that's not even enamored with the genre, directs something in the genre. We'll usually get something that transcends the genre or goes beyond it. That's not just for horror fans, that's something deeper. And I think that this film, as it is, really is incredibly unique in a variety of ways. And but anyway, what was your impression? My impression was, I love what is there, and I'm only more interested to see if we'll ever get the whole product. But what was your thought?
I'll say that I also quite like... This is not a working microphone, by the way.
It should be those 70s ones. Yeah. Well, what did you think, sir?
I thought it was pretty good. I liked it quite a bit. I'll say this. I kind of like the way it is. I don't know if knowing more about this situation, I'm sure it would be really good. But the way it is, the way that it's kind of confusing, and kind of like weird and kind of like bizarrely cut, and it's just a weird movie, right? I think that really helped it. Like that weird, you don't really know what's happening. There's always like intrigue. You want to know what's happening, but it never really like concretely explains anything. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it does add kind of a vague quality to everything that's going on. but like you said, in a positive way, not in
Yeah.
a what the fuck
In
kind
a
of
way that I was like super intrigued the entire movie. Like,
And again, I go back to Phantasm.
yeah, like that. It would like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost the exact same thing. Again, two completely different films, although they are both unique in the genre. That's another thing. But just like Phantasm, you'll get these abrupt cuts where you know that there was tons of stuff you missed, and by the next shot, you know, yeah, clearly these characters are not doing something, and there was no precedent to this happening. For example, there's a love storyline in it that really just comes out of nowhere. But yeah, it all adds to this weird, dreamlike, phantasmagoric quality that the film establishes from the get-go. So it actually benefits from how little you end up knowing about stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie, and most likely you haven't, like you said, like we said, you can get it on digital download. But just to give you a kind of a brief overlook of what's going on, basically it takes place in a Carpathian village that is being inhabited by Nazi soldiers during the war, World War II, obviously. And they've set camp there, and they've decided to inhabit this ancient castle, this ancient fortress, the keep of the title. And the superstitious villagers warned them away from staying there. And it's almost like Dracula in that sense. It begins kind of like Dracula in that sense, which I thought was really cool. You know, they're in ancient Carpathia, basically. You know, so it's the land of Dracula. They go through a pass to get there, just like in Dracula. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it certainly felt that way. And anyway, as you would expect from a horror film, though not in the trope way, they end up unleashing what is forbidden or what is locked, I should say, and forbidden in the eyes of the villagers in that fortress. Because within the fortress there are these mysterious nickel crosses, but they're not your traditional Christian cross, and they seem to be a seal to hold something that's not really, it seems, not really on this earth, but there's like it's a gateway, presumably, almost like a Stargate to some other alternate abyss.
There was that scene where, you know, when they break the seal and the Nazi kind of falls through, and it just kind of shows what's in there. That was kind of like, I said that this movie felt very Italian. I was specifically saying like The Beyond and shit like that. It feels something like something otherworldly that you don't really know what it is.
Whatever the keep was built over is definitely some sort of gateway, some sort of portal, and yeah, that was a great shot, you know, where the Nazi is peering into,
and it just keeps going back.
Yeah, like this infinite chasm, and at the bottom of the chasm, although I just said infinite, but it seems to be infinite, this massive chasm, there are these
pillars.
These massive stone
Kind of looks
pillars.
like an altar almost, kind of.
And through those pillars comes this entity which begins to pick off the Nazis, and at the same time we have this other mysterious character that wakes up, glowing eyes and all. He looks like a guy, glowing eyes and all, wakes up, you know, a few countries away, as if triggered by the opening of this chasm, and he ventures there to try to stop the events that are going. Long story short, more Nazis arrive when all the Nazis are getting killed off, and the mystery continues to unfold. But yeah, man, just on that concept alone, it's pretty amazing. And this story is based on a book, which is part of a series that's not really interconnected, much more.
That's like a thematic series.
Yeah, thematic series. We haven't read the book, and I kind of don't want to now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I kind of do, because the movie does leave you wanting to know more. And then again, the power of the movie comes from how little you do know. But the parallels are pretty clear. The being within the keep is Luciferian in nature, though not not clearly that at all. It seems to be something otherworldly, and there's parallels. And the being that is there to stop him seems to be angelic in nature, you know. But and they even draw parallels. I really enjoyed when the being in the keep, kind of does a Faustian exchange with a doctor that they bring in to translate the warnings that are being put up around the keep. And there is a Faustian exchange there, you know. I give you this and you give me something in return. And later, when this doctor realizes that he's been tricked,
basically like
there's
the dude.
Yeah, there's like a mock representation of the scene, or I'm sorry, not the scene, but the part of the Bible where Abraham is asked to sacrifice Isaac to his God, and there's like a mock version of that. So yes, this is a kind of like proto-satanic figure, but it's not that, but they follow these kind of ideas, and at the same time you get are these aliens, are these beings that proceed.
In the book, he's like a sorcerer, like an ancient sorcerer from the first humans or whatever. That's what it says on the Wikipedia. That's the most the research I did. So I don't know if all those like kind of like,
we don't know how much of those elements Mann would
I don't know if
preserve.
they're for the movie or if they're also in the book.
So while Mann can be incredibly loyal to the material, he's also known to go on his own route. So we don't know, because a lot of the stuff was cut out.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how much he preserved. On top of that, because this production was so troubled, a lot of stuff was reshot and rewritten. The ending we got in the movie, which I won't ruin for anybody that's going to watch it, was actually kind of like an ending that they ended up just having to do versus the one that he wanted to do. And they ended up reshooting it a number of times. And the studio didn't even want to put up money for it. The production ran over schedule and over budget. There was all kinds of chaos on the set. They lost their effects guy. So the effects we get are actually kind of like
literally lost him. He's dead.
Yeah, he did. He died during production, and they didn't know what effects he was going to do for the creature in the keep. And so what we end up getting is like an amalgamation of a bunch of trial effects that ultimately Michael Mann decided this is what I wanted to look like. And there's a variety of ways the creature presents itself. It's almost like Frank in Hellraiser, as in once he is summoned from where he is from,
he has to rebuild
he has to rebuild his body. So you see initially, which I thought was really cool and reminiscent of the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, a column of smoke and fire, basically.
With just like lights for the eyes.
Yeah, and it was a really neat effect.
It's like lights, and then there's kind of like a rough, like nervous system in there too of lights.
It was a really neat effect. Looked pretty astonishing, and then later, as it evolves, as it is soul sucks Nazis basically, and feeds off of who they are. In fact, there's a great scene when one of the Nazis asks him, "What are you?" and he says, "I am from you."
What are you? Where do you come from?
Where am I from? I am from you.
I thought that was fucking awesome. That they didn't even elaborate on that is fucking awesome. And apparently in the original cut they do elaborate a bit more. There's an extra scene to that.
That's the thing. Like, I like that you don't know what's happening.
But again,
it would be cool to see.
Yeah, I digress. We don't really know what that longer cut would be like, but it's really awesome to see something work despite the fact that it probably shouldn't have worked. But effects wise, it's pretty neat. Once it evolves to the more sinew and musculature type creature, that was probably my least favorite of the incarnations of it. but it still was pretty cool looking. And it led to some really nice shots later on because its eyes and mouth emit this red, kind of hellish glow. And, there was some really nice shots using that. And, its final incarnation is basically fucking Apocalypse from X-Men.
Pretty much, as a massive head.
But, yeah, man, it was really neat. It was a really neat and unique adversary. Coincidentally, the series this is part of is the Adversary Cycle. But yeah, it was very interesting. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, our protagonist, or one of our protagonists, the superpowered protagonist, the antithesis to this villain, is also this mysterious stranger, with some form of power, and he appears to be a key to something, a guardian, a gatekeeper, if you will. There's insinuations that he put the creature there, or he locked him away, and that he has been guarding it. All that stuff is left up in the air most of the time for you to decide, and it's pretty easy to figure out, thankfully. And as a result of that, it's pretty awesome. At least I thought. Anything you want to add to any of that you might have thought there?
When it comes to the kind of like good guy character, I think this is where they cut the most out, because he does kind of just appear at one point, which again is good. It works in the way they do it in the movie. But then, like you said, there's a romantic storyline in there that just kind of comes out of nowhere, and then it becomes kind of like a part of the plot, and it is really abrupt, and it's kind of odd. But at the same time, they've established that he kind of has these powers and shit, and then later on, she asked him like why he did it, and he's like, because he wanted to feel or whatever. So you're like, all right, you get a sense of what's happening. That being said, that is where you notice some pretty heavy cuts. But I think again, I liked how it was like kind of odd. But yeah, it's worthy to note that.
And it's not only the only places you'll notice cuts. Some cuts are so abrupt that the score will just suddenly end. And then it'll cut to sounds. The sound design is super uneven because apparently when Michael Mann, turned in his full cut, the studio just said that's not what we want, and they took the film away from him and just cut it themselves. So the sound design is unfinished. So sometimes you can barely hear people. Sometimes you can hear every inch of a pin dropping somewhere. On top of that, this movie was supposed to have a score by Tangerine Dream, and the digital copy available for public consumption has a substitute score. Now, I don't know who did this score, but it was
really good.
It was pretty good.
It was really eerie.
But apparently the original score is the rights issues are holding it back from being put back into the movie.
It is available in the UK Netflix version, though, for some reason.
So we didn't get to see that, but... Yeah, because Europe, U.S. rights versus rights elsewhere are different. But
I really liked this score.
The score was very reminiscent of something from Italy in the late 70s or 80s. Eerie, ominous, atmospheric. It was a great score. So I can only imagine what the other one sounds like.
There's bits where it kind of sounds like church music at times, or especially early on. And I actually... There is some weird abrupt cuts, but it lends to that kind of weird feeling that the whole movie has. I really like the score. So yeah, it's weird. I don't know how the actual score is.
Now this movie is full of old badasses. Of course, at the time, they weren't old, so that's a fucking thing. So we're going to talk about the characters and the actors portraying them. This movie's like like I said, like a meeting point for these future badasses. And so in the movie we have Scott Glenn, who is like now the prototypical cantankerous badass in modern day entertainment, most notably as Stick in the Daredevil series. Jürgen Prochnow, who is like the go-to guy for good guy Germans, and unfortunately also in House of the Dead. And still one of the ugliest men ever, but you're like he's fucking cool.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Gabriel Byrne, who is of course most recently in Hereditary, which was weird. I was like, oh, what the fuck, Gabriel fucking Byrne,
He's in the keep.
who's played the devil before, and it's pretty interesting because it took me the longest to recognize him. I was like,
That
what
was
the
a
hell?
clap for him, by the way,
Yeah, it
not
was-
because there was a moth.
Not totally a moth at all, but yeah, man, it took me the longest to recognize him because he was so good looking back then. I guess handsome.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck? And he was just such a great fit for the asshole Nazi.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a Nazi you actually sympathize with because he's more of a reluctantly taking his role and he's
That's-
unwilling to victimize.
That's the stuff that I would have liked to see more of.
yes,
Because
yes.
it's really cool, but it is a little bit, it's obviously cut.
And the last person is Ian McKellen. That's right, fucking Gandalf is in this as a decrepit and sickly Jew that is taken out of a concentration camp. That's right, he's Magneto in this.
Yeah.
So later he's seduced by Apocalypse. But anyway, fucking Ian McKellen plays this decrepit Jew who is brought into the mix by the Nazis to decipher what is in the keep, and ends up being seduced by the power that lies in there.
And if you ever wanted to see Gandalf act like Gollum for a little bit, this is your movie.
This is it. Yeah,
He's like doing this and
he
stuff.
basically becomes a victim of corruption, and there's a lot of interesting themes with these characters that this is where I think I would love to see more of, because like you said, the interactions between Jürgen Prochnow's more sympathetic reluctant Nazi, the working man Nazi, the guy that had to be part of the Reich or he'd get killed, versus the gung-ho all about the ideology Nazi. Those interchanges were interesting, but more to
the guy who's never had to fight. He's just in power.
But more interesting to me was the interchanges between the atheistic Jew that is so hell-bent on not believing that he ends up falling for the deception. I would want to have seen more of that and his interactions with others because of that. All that stuff is super interesting. That's what that's why I'm like, man, I really hope one day maybe this will happen.
That's the thing I would like to see, like, because the character stuff was actually pretty damn interesting. So it would have been neat to see that expanded, and maybe just keep the more supernatural stuff a mystery, and I think that would be badass.
But anybody who didn't enjoy this, there are, of course, other bit characters, villagers, a priest, the love interest for our hero, or our supernatural hero, I should say.
I can't think of anyone who sucked. I mean, the lady, she's got poodle hair, so that's a thing.
That is an anachronistic hairdo.
It's like, this is
It's got
not...
like 80s hair in the 40s.
This is not a 40s hairdo. It looked like a poodle.
Let's move on to the effects in this. We kind of already touched on them a little bit in terms of describing them. But before we get to the prosthetics for the creatures and some of the other effects, the supernatural powers effects and stuff like that, I want to touch on the set design, which was so convincing that I actually thought they must have filmed this in Romania somewhere, but apparently it was just filmed in England, somewhere in North Wales. So impressed, because everything looked pretty downright authentic to that region. Costume design excellent, all that stuff was really, really neat. And the set design for this weird void where the creature whose name is Molasar, which you never hear in the movie,
we knew
but you can see of the subtitles, where he lives. So Molasar's domain, also very, unique set design, which I really, really thought was neat. But what about what was your impression on the effects? I already kind of mentioned.
I really like the effects. I think the standout is the cloud creature.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Along with I like.
You might want to get it.
This was the day. Oh yeah, so you can hear me. This was the day of. This was back in the day where rotoscoping was a thing. So you do get a lot of cool glowing.
Yeah, a lot of
80s,
effects.
80s looking effects
that harken to the 80s, but are neat.
But yeah, they use them in really neat ways. Look, this mic is clearly not real, but it is a real mic. It just doesn't work. They do use them in neat ways, like in the cloud, you do see kind of like this nervous system almost at times. when he reaches out to Gandalf, you know, the hand is this kind of cool looking animated rotoscope thing. But I think that was the biggest standout. I also really like the design. I mean, it's rubber. It's a rubber suit. And I think that the fact that it's so rubbery is a little bit of a detriment to it. But the design for when he's kind of like this muscly dude, I thought looked really cool.
It's impressive considering that apparently at that point, Michael Mann had to do this work.
Yeah.
Because the guy had died.
So it was just kind of... Yeah, considering that, it's really
you're like,
cool.
Damn, this...
But I really like the design for it. It looks really cool. The only thing is that, like, when he talks, I think it would have been cooler if they had kept his mouth open with the light.
Mm-hmm. And it was just
the sound.
Omnipresent voice.
That would have been really cool. But, yeah, when he, like, talks, it's kind of rubbery. But it looks really cool. The design is cool. Yeah. And then in his final form, he's got a big-ass head, but he still looks really interesting.
Yeah, some really interesting, unique, standout effects in this. You know, that alone just saves them. It doesn't even matter that, you know, some of them aren't as effectual as you can be at the time and with the budget, but
they're the kinds of effects that are just kind of like, wow, this is really, really interesting the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they don't, you know, fully work, like you said, but most of them do work like 100. I'll say like 90% of the time they're really good.
Now, my favorite effect, personally, was during the final confrontation between our two supernatural, you know, characters. It basically takes place in a wasteland of decimated, burnt Nazi corpses, and their machinery is all twisted into this landscape.
Which is not seen on screen, which kind of makes it more interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, again, clearly they cut something there, but to go from one place to the other, you're like, whoa. And the thing is, the leaps in, you know, the cuts lead to not leaps in logic, but they're actually done in a way where you can fill in the blanks and assume certain things certain ways. So again, it works. But yeah, it looked pretty great. Now the action in this goes kind of hand in hand with the effects. It basically all it comes to a head, because before this is just kind of dramatic interactions between people and toying with the concepts of what was originally wholly there, you know. But ultimately it leads up to this confrontation between these two guys, which I thought was pretty neat. I wouldn't say it's action oriented,
which apparently was supposed to be.
Yeah, but you know what?
He was supposed to have a sword, and it was supposed to be like a battle.
Yeah, and there was, you know, there was a variety of scenes shot and some not shot. I think what we got is actually super awesome, considering the ideas, the parallels that are being put in there with these characters. You know, the Luciferian and angelic parallels. So it works in the sense that during this final confrontation, I said I wasn't going to ruin it, so if you want to skip this little part. But basically, I mean, it's obvious that the bad guy's going to lose. Most of the time in movies, the bad guy's going to lose. But the way he is done away with is not conclusive. Yeah. He's basically cast back into the void, cast back into chaos, if you will. And the way it's done is in a self-sacrificial fashion, where the seal that held him back, which was, as aforementioned, a form of a cross, is basically replaced by the body of our kind of pseudo-angelic protagonist. Yeah. So that was, again, it runs those weird kind of pseudo-biblical parallels, which were really fucking neat and added that substance of originality, because we're so familiar with this type of mythology, but then to see it in a completely different light, very, very, very neat.
It does kind of raise a few questions in that, like, if he could have, because it's established that the thing that's keeping them there is something that our hero, it's his thing. He sealed him there, and yet at the end he sends him back, and it's kind of implied that it's, at least for now, kind of it's like semi-permanent for now. You know what I mean? But he said once he's gone, it's done. Of course, yes, there is that openness, but it makes you wonder why he didn't do that earlier. Well, in a good way, mind you. Like it kind of gives him a little more substance. Like he's here for a reason. He could have done this earlier, but he waited for this moment, and he's here. And apparently, in the book, that is a thing. Like he hesitated to kill him back in the day. So there's something there. That being said, it works. It made me fill in some blanks and make my own little story, which is good. But yes, there is that kind of like a temporary nature to it, which is kind of cool.
Now, we already talked about the score, and we'll stick with that it's fucking awesome, despite us having not heard the actual intended score. So, I guess anybody that's in Europe will get to hear the actual score. Tell us how that is. Visually and aesthetically, this film, again, has very dreamlike cast over it. A lot of fog being used, artistically, mind you. Disorienting shots. Now the film is not obviously has not been remastered ever, so there's a lot of haziness and blurriness here and there. But you know what? That ultimately ended up contributing to this already kind of weird, out of this world feeling. Like it's almost like you've stepped into another plane of existence, even though
it's like when you used
still there.
When you used to rent a kind of like. A tape that was kind of watched a lot and it had that unique look, and then you buy the remaster and you're like, oh, it doesn't look the same.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that.
So ultimately, this is one of those rare cases where, despite the movie being butchered by the studio, what is left over, the scraps that are left over, still miraculously work. Now, in truth, while a lot of people claim that Michael Mann has, rebuked this film, he's denounced it. In reality, he's never done such a thing. He's mentioned that certain things in their work, and basically expressed regret that it doesn't exist in its fullness, in its full form. Which again, yeah, obviously that makes sense. But it is interesting. It's an interesting part of cinematic history, especially coming from a guy that. You'd never expect Michael Mann to make a horror movie. Closest he got to that was Manhunter, and that's a crime movie. But yeah, man, let's give this a final score. Any final thoughts? It is worthy
to note, just as a bonus, that the writer hated it. He said there's some good shots, which there is, but that it made no sense. Of the book, I mean. And that there is a comic adaptation by IDW, 2005, that he wrote. So if you want his vision, that might be the way to go. Unless you want to read the book.
I think it's pretty safe to say that even if we had got the full vision, it would have been distinctly Michael Mann's.
Yeah, it definitely would have. Which is why I'm interested to see, to read the book or read the comic to see what he wanted. But I'm kind of leaning towards this one a little more. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with what we got.
I'm definitely gonna try to find these books. And now that I know about the comic, I'll try to see that. I'm open to all translations. I know what you're saying, because you usually end up preferring the first thing you come across, which is why a lot of people like. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, we like it too. A lot of people like the 1980s version of Stephen King's It, for example, and refuse to accept it. I'm not saying that about you. I'm just saying that. So I get that. I get that notion. I kind of don't want to ruin that, but I also kind of want to see what the fuck.
Yeah, I think I just like the fact that they don't explain stuff, and I don't know if explaining all that will make it better or worse.
Kind of like Apocalypse Now and Apocalypse Now Redux.
Yeah.
Redux was the intended cut, but upon watching both, unbiased, I still prefer the original cut.
Yeah, that's one of those. We definitely got to check it out to see what's going on.
But we don't fucking know, because we didn't see that other version. So hopefully one day we will. Let's give this a score on scale 1 to 10. Give it to me.
I expected to like this one. I didn't expect it to like it this much. I like freaking love this movie, surprisingly. I'm gonna go high with it on this one. I'm gonna give it a 9.5, leaving a little space for if they ever release the extended cut. Otherwise, it'd be like, ooh.
Yeah,
I realize there's problems with it, but I love the feel of it.
Yeah, it is a pretty impressive movie. It's not for everyone, obviously.
Yeah, that's true.
But if this is the type of shit you like, and it is, then it's gonna be something that sticks to your old fucking brain for a while. I will give it a score of 9. I'm not going to go to the 9.5 level yet because there is a lot that is excised and that I would have loved to see. But impressive feat considering considering the filmmaker didn't get to finish his product the way he intended, that it still works on so many levels. So yeah, this is definitely something you should watch if you're a fan of the genre stuff. Yeah, I think we should probably call this a cult fucking classic right here.
They should be classics.
They should indeed.
It's not going to go on horror nostalgia because no one remembers this one.
Yep. Anyway, this has been Ahab. That's the Goon Tick. Hit like, share, subscribe to the notification buttons. Watch this motherfucking movie. Maybe if enough people fucking watch it, they'll go, hey, we can make a buck if we release this full cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out.
This music, story times, all kinds of shit for you.